All right, once you have SolidWorks open, if you go to the gear up here in the middle, we're bringing up system options. If you can't find the gear, I think it's also under tools options. We're looking for something that's towards the bottom. It's called backup recover. So here's what I have set up for mine currently. I have auto recover set to save every 10 minutes. You can change the file location here. And again, if you don't have a default here and you're like new to Windows, wherever you've been saving your files, if you click on these three dots, it will bring up kind of this like Windows navigation dialog. I recommended that everyone have a folder under documents. Again, if you have no preference and does 400, you can create a folder in there called backup and just like set it to that folder and click select. I'm not going to do that because mine is in this like SolidWorks folder, so I'm just going to leave it there. Honestly, so you can think of this as like how much time are you willing to lose if your computer crashes or SolidWorks crashes. I feel like 10 minutes is reasonable because it's not, you could set it to like every minute, but I'm assuming your SolidWorks is going to run slower. I don't actually have that verified, but that's my guess. That would make sense. Yeah. So yeah, I think 10 minutes is reasonable. Honestly, you could probably even do like 15 or 30, but I think 10 is fine. So now it's worth mentioning that if you save this gets wiped every time you manually save your file. So, and this is, again, I'm just getting this from reading the link I sent you. So if you manually save your file, like go file save as you're working, it won't create an auto recover until 10 minutes from that point on. Does that make sense? Okay, backups. Let's look at this. I think the link shows it really nicely with this image here. So let's say we're building this like block thing. You can extrude this rectangle. If you hit save on this, it will save a copy of it in your backup folder. You then might make a change like adding this cylinder on top. And my understanding is when you save this, depending on what your settings are, not only will it create a new backup here, but it will keep this old backup of just the rectangle. So you'll have two backups then. That's my understanding. Or it could be that when you add, because here it says, yeah. So, okay, current, you save it. It creates a copy. So this is after, current after change. You save it, they cross this out, so I think you get this backup and this backup. Does that make sense? So looking in here, this is number of backup copies per document. If you just keep it at 1, I think it will only keep the latest thing you did. So for example, when you save this with the cylinder, it will only keep this copy. When you save this with the holes, it will make this copy. That's currently at the settings of 1. If you have the settings at 2, when you save this one, it'll make this copy and this copy. I think, something along those lines. Well, that's why you want to set it to where you want it. So the article said, the example said, if you're saving frequently, you probably want more backup copies because you're saving with more incremental changes. Honestly, I don't use this. I just manually back up my file. Anytime I'm about to do a major change or do something I'm uncertain about, I'll manually say backup, and I can show you what I do. If you're not sure what to do, you could literally set this to 1 and set this to something low like 3. And again, set where you want this to be. That would probably be my recommendation for these settings. I can't imagine a situation where you'd want more than this. If you're the kind of person that likes to go to old files or you just like to have lots of safety nets and stuff, you could crank this up to 2 or 3 and crank this back up to 7. But honestly, I don't even have this checked. I've never used it. Maybe I will just for chagrins. I'll set it to 1 and 3. Any questions on this? Cool. All right, moving on. Today, if we look at the syllabus, the goal is to learn extrudes and fillets. We kind of covered fillets a little bit at the end of last class. But let's work together on this. So if we go File, New, let's all make a new part file. All right, so we're just going to sketch a box. I'm going to take this top plane here. So again, clicking on the top plane, I'm going to hit Alt-S to enter sketch mode. If you don't like the hotkeys, you can always click on the top plane, click on the sketch feature here, and click on sketch. But again, Alt-S is quicker. We know we're in sketch world. Why? There's a thing in the corner, right? And the origin changed to red. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a box. There is a quicker way and a slower habitual way. So I have R bound to rectangle, or to make a rectangle form. So this is typically what I do. So again, you can hit R, click in a corner, and click. Now, if I was trying to make a square, let's talk about some relations within sketches. Because this is a rectangle, this is already given a horizontal. This is given a vertical. If I click on both of these, holding down Control to select both of them, they're both yellow, they're both selected. Again, I invite you all to do this with me. You'll notice that we can add different relations here on the left. If I'm making a square, which relation do I want? Equal, absolutely. You also notice that this is blue, it's kind of floating in space. You always want something attached to the origin. In general, it's a good habit for the origin to be centered on your object. So while this would be the easy solution to drag a corner onto the origin, what I typically do is I create a line. So I'm going to hit L and go from one corner to another. And then I'm going to select this line and holding Control, select the origin. And I'm going to click on midpoint. So I'm telling this line to be centered on the origin. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, if we're making a box, this line is really just there to center the square on the origin. So what we want to do is we want to select this line and change its setting to for construction. So you have your box here, it's off. The way to put it on the origin is you select the line you created, you hold Control, you select the origin, so that now they're both yellow. And now again, it's giving you options for relationships. And you're saying, you know what? I want this line and to have the origin at its middle, at its midpoint. And so I then click on this, and then it snaps over there, it jumps. Certain lines you want to give the designation of for construction. This does several things. If you're trying to extrude this box, which is what we want to do, when you extrude an object or do any feature command to an object, it will ignore any construction lines. They're dotted, they're just there for relationships. So that's why you would check this, it becomes a dotted line. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. If we're trying to make a perfect cube, you might want to dimension this so we know how tall to make it. So we can hit D for dimension. Click on one of these lines, drag this out, and just 5 inches is cool. Hit 5 and hit enter. So now we're still in sketch world. We can click on the feature options here while we're still in our sketch. And now we can select this extrude feature. And right now we're on our top plane. Right, so if I click front view, oops. If I click on this here and click on front, it'll show us what it looks like from the front. So we want to make sure that, in this instance, I'm going to use the top plane as the floor. Again, it depends on the object you're working on. In general, when in doubt, that's a good thing to do. And so here, when we click on extrude, you'll notice it gives us this yellow 3D form showing us where it's going. It gives us an arrow which we can drag. to different heights. But the way that I like to work is to use this property dialog box, where again, it's asking you, hey, you're building a new feature. What settings do you want within your feature? This is what it defaults to. So from is where you want the extrusion to happen from. It defaults from the sketch plane. So again, the piece of paper that you drew the box on, that's where it's going to start the extrude. Generally, that's great. For the option of how it extrudes, it sets the default to blind. And what that means is you give it a number and that's how long it will be. Again, a very basic settings property. And really, for now, that's all you need to worry about. So you know that the extrusion is happening from the sketch where it exists, and you're telling it blindly how long it should be. In this instance, if we want it to be a cube, we already dimensioned it. You can hit 5, and then go ahead and click check. And now we all have made a perfect cube in CAD World. Yay! Any questions on that?
Yes. When you go to make a perfect cube, do you hold down control? Is that what you do?
Oh, gotcha. Yes. So I'll do this on the side here. Hit R. So in order to make both of these equal, you want to click on this, hold down Control, click on this, and that, yes, so that you're selecting both at the same time, and then say equal. If I were to click on this and then click on this, you'll notice that the relation options change depending on what you have selected. So right now, my only options are horizontal, vertical, or fixed. The minute that I add another line, now there's 2 lines that can have a relationship to each other. So there's more options. For what it's worth, this fix command, try to avoid using that. So if everyone can just look up for a minute, because this is very important. This anchor, this is kind of a workaround. I will look for opportunities where it's acceptable to use this to explain it to you. But for now, try to avoid using it. What it does is it kind of just like literally dumbly tells it to not move and just stay exactly where you are. That's very confusing, not only for you if you come back later to work on the file, but it will definitely be confusing if anyone comes to work on your file. It's just kind of like a bad practice. The anchor is totally just used as a workaround, so try to avoid using it. Is that clear? Okay. Cool. Does everyone have a cube? All right. So again, extrude, essentially whatever shape you draw. You know, if I draw something silly here like this. Oh, no worries. And if I add some curvature to it, whatever shape you draw, it just takes that and makes it longer to whatever length you tell it to be. Again, think of it like a toothpaste pushing a toothpaste tube, pushing a toothpaste in a cylinder, or Play-Doh. That's an extrude. Again, probably the most basic command in SolidWorks. We started with revolves because we're working on bottles. All right, so every feature has a partner feature, or how do I phrase this as a question? Yeah, there's often an opposite feature. For every positive addition feature, there's a subtraction feature, right? Does that make sense? So now we're going to do an extrude cut. Let's say we want to make this into like an actual box with a cavity. So what we might do, again, as best practice, we might draw something on this top plane again. So I'm going to select the top plane and hit Alt-S to enter sketch mode again. If you want it to rotate and be normal to you, you can hit Alt-N, N for normal, and that will rotate the plane to be like a sheet of paper facing us. Again, you'll notice because this is our first feature here, if you click on the arrow, it shows the sketch it's based off of. We did not go through the step of copying it for a master sketch because that really would have been best practice, but we're just learning a new feature here. If you ever want to see a sketch that's within a feature, you can always right-click on this and click on the eyeball to see it. And that's useful in this instance because if we're trying to cut a hole in here, you can actually like select this sketch and click Convert Entities or hit C that will copy it into your new sketch. So now we have this black line in here. And this can be useful to offset the hole that we want in here. So again, I don't know if I'm going too fast, but if you need to see a sketch in another feature, right-click, click on the eyeball. If you want to copy the sketch, you can click on it and hit Convert Entities or hit the key C, hotkey C for Convert. And now you'll notice that I have this black box in here in my new sketch. It's black because it is literally copying the box from the previous one. It's aligned with it. It's defined by it. You'll notice, what line did it not copy? The construction line. Again, that's another property of construction lines. When you convert entities, if you select the whole sketch, it's going to ignore construction lines. If you want to copy a construction line, you actually have to select it and then hit convert entities if you need it or want it.
So convert entities is copy.
Convert entities is like, you want to think of it as, a short answer, yes, convert entities is copy. Okay. Long answer is, I have a sketch on a piece of paper. I then want to put a sketch on a new piece of paper. And let's say whatever sketch is on here, I want it to be here too. Convert entities is literally just like, take these features and put them here. Does that make sense? It's useful, convert entities is useful for working with a master sketch, because then the reason that convert entities is more complex than just copy is now if I change sketch 2, because sketch 3 is a convert entities, it will copy whatever changes are made in sketch 2. Does that make sense? Right. It's like a points to. It's a copy that is constantly pointing to the original.
But it doesn't create sketch itself. It first needs to create new sketch and then
Yes.
through the sketch into C and then
Correct. So you're in this sketch, you need to enter a new sketch to convert entities from this to this. If you're just in this sketch and you're not creating a new one, convert entities won't work.
and it doesn't matter which position the second sketch is, like above the old one or below.
You can only convert entities with sketches that exist before it. The tree is upside down. The tree is upside down. It grows from the top down, just like a Photoshop history. It does not. So if I want to copy this construction line, I have to select it and hit convert entities, and now it's black. It's no longer construction line. I would have to select it and check for construction for it to be a construction line again. For the new entity to be a construction line. Okay, everyone with me? So actually, this box now, we're just using this for reference. So we actually want this box we just copied to be for construction. So we're gonna click drag and select our new sketch and check for construction. And now while you're still selected on this, so we just click for construction, we're gonna learn a new tool. It's called offset entities. It should be in the middle here for everybody. So everyone with me? We copied the box over, we selected it, we made it for construction. We're now gonna click on offset entities here. And you'll notice it's giving us a yellow line. It should be in the middle top. We're still in sketch world.
Are you in sketch 2?
I'm in sketch 2. Everyone still with me? I'll back it up. No worries, it's okay. Here. Just for everyone, depending on where anyone is, I'll just exit out of this. Okay. Top plane, I'm creating a new sketch, Alt-S. Some of you may not see this previous sketch, but it doesn't matter. You can select this previous sketch, the original one you did, and click on, provided you're in a new sketch on the same plane, you can click on Convert Entities, and it copies that sketch over to make black lines. I'm now going to click and drag to select all of the black lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I want what I just copied to be in here for construction. Because I actually don't, I want these lines for reference, not for actually cutting with them. So now they've changed to dotted lines. So while you're selecting them, we're going to learn a new tool. It's called offset entities. It's in the middle here. So we're going to click on that. You'll notice some yellow lines that appeared on the outside. Now this is a sketch feature, and again, we have a property manager for the features of this new sketch tool that we're using. So we can tell the offset, we can change the size of it by playing with this arrows here, or we can actually type in an exact amount. And you can also reverse it. You'll notice that under the options here, the checkboxes, there's add dimensions. So you'll notice when we hit the check mark, there'll be a dimension added. Reverse, we actually want to check that because we want this to be a box with a hole in it. So we're going to click on this so the lines are on the inside. Select chain, I think, means it's selecting everything. It's a good question. Let's try it. Negative number works. It checks the reverse box for you. Good question. Yeah. Well, it gets confusing. Right now it's kind of simple because it's like, well, I think the reason they did that is it's hard to define what's positive and what's negative. Like here, you know what I mean? Yeah, I agree with you. It's a little confusing. I don't know, like in and out might have been a more like clear designation. So, okay, hopefully everyone has something like this. The number you set in here is arbitrary for this demo. Mine's at 0.4. You can go ahead when you have this and click check. So hopefully everyone has something like this. Yes, we all together? I'll slow down for anyone to catch up. Yeah, it's on the bottom. I did that on purpose. If you did that elsewhere, it's okay. Okay, so we're still in Sketch World. We're now going to do an extruded cut command. Again, for every positive feature, chances are there's an opposite feature. So for every additive, there's a removal, except with fillets, but we'll get to that. So again, we're going to click on, so we're in the sketch. We know we're in Sketch World because of these icons here. We're going to go ahead and click on extruded cut. And you'll notice the same thing. The minute I click on that, it gives me this like kind of yellow box showing me what it's going to cut. So I want to show you all some new options here in the property dialog box. Okay. You don't have extruded cut. Okay, if you don't have extruded cut, look at extruded boss base here and see if like, sometimes there's like a drop down arrow that gives you more options. It might be there. But let's go ahead and explore this for anyone that needs to add extrude cut. Again, make sure you're in features on here. And I mean, you should have my setup, so it should, you found it? No, no worries, it's okay. Honestly, that is one of the harder things with learning a new program is all the new icons and where do things exist. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click on extruded cut when you're in the sketch. You should see this happen. There is a chance some of you may have exited your sketch. I'm just going to show you what that looks like if you did. So if you have the yellow box, that's good. Just hang out there for a minute. Sometimes you might click on a feature and you might get this error. What that's saying is like, hey, we don't know what you want to use for your extrude cut because most features need a sketch. So here it's saying either select a plane to create a sketch or select an existing sketch. That's what this is telling us. Sometimes when we're in the property dialog box like this, at any time you can expand this arrow here and this will show you the tree you have. And this can be useful for selecting things. So in this instance, I'm telling it to do an extrude cut. The program is telling me, hey, I don't know what you want to use to extrude cut. And here I'm saying, you know what, I want you to use sketch 4. And now it will get me to the same place. So anytime you see an error there, that means you're outside of the sketch and you need to select it. The other workaround is to re-enter the sketch by going back into it and then doing the same feature. Okay, So we're going to play with the dialog box here and cut extrude. Again, the property manager here is very similar to extrude, if not identical. So starting from the top, what are the options we see? The first option is where do you want the cut to happen from? Again, it defaults to the sketch plane. Wherever that sheet of paper where you have the sketch on, that's where the cut is coming from. Here we're going to mess with it a bit. So we're going to expand this and see what the options are. What we're going to play with, we're going to select, I'll just quickly speak through all of these. Surface face plane means that you select a new sheet of paper from where the cut happens from. Vertex is you select a point from where it happens from. And offset is you literally type in a number. So for example, I could type in 1 inch here and you'll notice it jumps up. Don't stress out about all of these nuances. This is good to be aware of. Again, when it comes to constructing your Jenga tower in a way that you don't want it to fail, this will be useful for those instances. For now, it's sufficient to know they exist. You don't have to worry about when to use them, when not to. I will look for opportunities to explain when you should use a different one. But for today's demo, we're just going to go ahead. We're going to use surface face plane. So again, click this drop-down menu, select surface face plane. And now here, the blue box is saying, so what's the surface face or plane you want it to cut from? We want our box to be open from the top, so I'm going to go ahead and select this top face. And you'll notice now the sketch is happening from there. Does that make sense? Did that jump for everybody? Okay. So now here, direction, again, this is where you would type in a number. If you want it to be an inch deep, you can type an inch. Blind means it just like blindly follows that number. Again, if you pull this drop-down menu, you'll see what the options are. So through all means that no matter how long this is, this will just be an infinite cut through anything that it meets. That's useful sometimes if you want to make a window or a hole in something. Through all both means both directions, so it'll cut up and down. Up to next means it will cut up until it meets the next objects. Again, you don't need to worry about these. It's more just for reference and knowing they exist. Up to vertex means up to a point that you select. Up to surface, same thing, up to a surface that it meets. Offset from surface is the one we're about to use. These are all just different ways to tell the feature where to stop. Midplane is kind of like blind. You'll notice here it's like if you want to cut that's 2 inches from a center point, that's what that is. So what we're going to use is up to surface, or sorry, offset from surface. And so now it's giving us some options here. You want to make sure that this is the universal sign for surface, this like wavy orange thing, piece of paper. Make sure that's blue. And go ahead and select the base of your object here. It should highlight it at pink. The pink matches this color here. Does everyone have something that looks kind of like this? If you don't, you can type in a number here like 1 inch. Cool? Okay, the number here doesn't matter, but again, so just to go over our settings, we're having our cut happen from a surface face or plane, which is the top. We're having it go offset from the bottom surface, which is this bottom face here. And we're having it offset, let's just say 0.4, or it really doesn't matter, whatever number you have in there. Again, you can reverse the offset. You'll notice if I click reverse, it goes 0.4 the opposite direction, but because this is something we want with a cavity, we want it to stop on the inside. So if you have all those settings, are there any questions on any?
Doesn't matter what number?
It doesn't matter. For this demo, it doesn't matter. Okay, so if everyone has that, just go ahead and click check. And you'll notice you should now have a hole inside of your box. No? If it's really shallow, go in here. So anytime you need to edit a feature, you can right-click on the feature and click on this tool right here, Edit Feature. So right-click on it, Edit Feature. If your hole is very shallow, just set this number to a small amount, provided you select the bottom face. So set it to like 0.4, and that should fix it.
I have this.
Um, if it says the end face cannot terminate the extruded feature, chances are that the face you selected is not in the direction the cut is going. So you want to go back to this portion here and click on it so it's blue, and make sure that you're clicking on the bottom face. Or you can click on the top plane. Is that working?
The arrow should go like this is the arrow, right?
So you're going from, oh, this setting is too big. That's why. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, good question. I apologize, everybody. I said the number doesn't matter. However, if the number is really big, like if it's 5 inches, then the cut is a 0 cut. It's like you're telling it to not cut at any depth. So just set this number to something like 0.4. And then click check. All right, cool. Does everyone have something like this? All right, so let me show you why you might want to do this offset cut like this, telling the cut to only go 0.4 inches off the back. Let's say you're making a toothbrush holder, for example. You started with a cube, you ask your boss or your colleague what they think, and they say, you know what, or your client, they say, you know what, we want it taller. So what you might do then is you might go to your first feature here, right click on it. So let's all do this together. Right click on this and click on edit feature. And you know, maybe they tell you we want it, let's say twice as tall. So you go in here, you type in 10 inches, and you'll notice it grows back again. And then click check. You'll notice your cut is still to the same depth. So again, it's like you're setting up your Jenga tower in a smart way so that when you make that change, you don't have to rebuild the tower. If you just did a blind cut and told it to be 5 inches or whatever, 4.6 inches deep, the minute your client tells you they want their toothbrush holder to be taller, now you have to make 2 changes. Not only do you have to make it taller, but you have to make the cut deeper. Does that make sense to everybody? That is how parametric modeling works. Hopefully you can foresee the changes that may need to happen. And again, it's all about setting up that Jenga tower, planning ahead in such a way that it won't be a pain in the ass when you need to change things.
Question, why do we need to make a square construction line? Like, it's supposed to...
Yes. Okay. Great question, and I'll build on that. So are you asking why we have this construction line here? I'll explain it to you. So let's say your client says, you know what? Not only do I want it taller, but 5 inches is massive. That's a huge toothbrush holder. I want it to be 3 inches by 3 inches. Well, the way you would do that is you would go back here. You would right click on this command, click on edit sketch. You would change this dimension to be 3 inches. Click that checkbox. If you did not copy this sketch or reference it, your cut would now be way bigger than the 3 inches by 3 inches. But now when I exit out of here, you'll notice it's still offset the same amount. Does that make sense? So I'll try and say it a different way. We copied the original sketch into the new one because we want that original sketch to drive the size of the hole. The reason we made it construction lines is because we're just using that sketch for reference. We don't actually want these lines to be cut or anything. No? Again, the best analogy I can think of again is that exercise on day 1. You're adding all of these different features to a tree. It's all these different commands as you build an object in 3D. You want to set it up in such a way, using the program for its strengths, where if you need to make changes, the tower won't fall. It won't break.
How do we first do the square, then we let the square alone, then we just copy that sketch, and then the copied sketch we make construction line, right? But the previous one still was like
Yeah.
So we went to the first one in changing measurements.
Yeah.
If you do the first sketch with those measurements, what do you have to cut to make the construction lines? Like, to change it.
It'll rebuild. Okay.
But I just, like, why they, I need to understand why they do each step in order to like, because like, you can't just do it because
No, I think I follow what you're saying. Um, yes. So, okay, the question is like, we need to understand why we do each step so that when you're working on your own, you know whether to do that step or not, right? Essentially. So, okay, there's a couple answers to that. One is an answer none of you are going to like, and that is sometimes you just learn from experience what you're trying to do and through trial and error. And again, that's how these projects are set up, and hopefully you learn that as we go through these steps and these projects, okay? Um, More often than not, whenever you're doing a command to an object, you want it to point to the original sketch. This might have been more clear is if we made this as a master sketch to begin with and we copied one at a time. That might have made more sense. The most direct answer I can give you is that when we made this new sketch, we copied this because we wanted this offset to reference the original sketch. You will know to do that on your own if you know that whatever you're trying to achieve is directly relates to something you previously did in your model.
So what would happen if we wouldn't make them construction lines? What would happen?
If this were not construction lines, we can look at that. So here's just a quick side tip. If you guys ever need to select something quickly, like I only want to select these objects with construction lines, you can right click on this and say select chain, and anything touching it or connected to it by a vertex will select the whole shape. If I uncheck this for construction lines, now the model doesn't know whether this is the hole or this is the hole. So if I exit out of here, you'll notice the cut now into the outside. Does that make sense? Construction lines are ignored for the feature. The feature only looks at solid lines. So you're giving it a shape to cut. And again, just remember when I drew that crazy shape and we made that extrusion. Here now, this is the shape, this is the closed entity now. It's this. So that's why we want to select, again, right click, select chain. It'll select everything on the outside. For construction, we only want to cut the middle, the inside. Cool? All right. Any questions on any of this? I feel like I might have lost some of you. I realize this is kind of a dry subject. Apologize. I'll do what I can to make it interesting. If anyone has suggestions, I'm always open to suggestions. Okay. Does everyone have a toothbrush holder like this? Cool. Okay, we're going to get into fillets and then we'll take a break. So we got into that last class. That's this option right here. So a fillet is a rounded edge. This is a unique command for a couple of reasons. One, it does not require a sketch. Two, there is no negative fillet. There is no scallop option, but I feel like there should be because that would be cool, but there's not. So fillets are very useful. You should always have fillets on edges. Pay attention to objects you interact with on a daily basis and try and find an object that does not have a fillet on it. Chances are it's very unlikely. And the reason for that, any guesses why every object has a fillet? Yeah, Max. Exactly, it's sharp. I mean, like if I look at this dongle, like this technically doesn't have a fillet, but I guarantee you, like on a very small level, it does. But that's exactly it. Most objects have radiuses to them, fillets to them, so that they're comfortable. They don't cut you. So okay, let's go ahead and click on this tool. Again, there's different options, but we'll look at the default today. So it defaults to constant size fillet over here. And here it says items to fillet, where what it's asking for edges that you want it to be round. So let's go ahead and select this inside, one of these inside edges here. And now you'll notice you can type in this value here, and this is the radius of the fillet. So this is a point, if I type in 0.5, it has a radius of 1/2 inch. Right? Diameter is the distance, the shortest distance to the center of a circle. The radius is half of the diameter. So a radius of 0.5 inches is a diameter of 1 inch. But let's just go ahead and apply this to one edge. Just again, for your knowledge, so you're aware, you can select faces. Let's see, it's not going to give it to us here. You know what? Don't worry about that. We'll get to that later. So just select one corner for now, set it to 0.5, and click check. We're now going to make a new fillet, so click on it again. And now let's click the outside edge compared to this. And what we're going to do with this one, let's click on this incremental and keep clicking on it until you get really close to that edge. And eventually, at some point, it's going to disappear. When it disappears, back up one. And let's look at what we see here. What's up? How? Okay, sorry. I'm saying to incrementally increase your fillet by just clicking this up arrow. Or you can type in a really big number. But I'm saying click on that until it disappears, until you see the yellow lines disappear, and then back it up one. Or if that's confusing, you can look at what I'm showing you, because I just want to make a point. Any guesses why it disappears? Because it can't do it anymore. Absolutely. I think that's clear to everybody, but I'm just going to show you. So look at this curve here. If it gets bigger, obviously the curve is going to hit here. The object is going to have something that can't exist. It just physically cannot do that. So the fillet, the term I use is it blows up. It doesn't work. It doesn't want to do it. This is a very macro example of something you are constantly going to struggle with. Fillets are like your best friend and your worst enemy. They often fail, and this is the reason they fail. You make a change, and a fillet that previously could work, now there's not enough space for it to exist, and so it errors out. Because of that, fillets, again, when you think of your Jenga tower, you want fillets at the top of your tower, but again, it's upside down, right, because you're building down. You want fillets at the bottom of your tree. Because they fail, you don't want features to rely on them. The other way to think about a fillet too is a fillet is not a design feature, it's a finishing feature. That's a very important distinction. A design feature is something that exists from the beginning, something that you want it to be what it is. It's part of your design intent. A fillet is kind of like a finish to it. You're just kind of adding around to the edge. So putting a fillet high up in your tree as a design feature is not a good idea. Yeah, Max. If I were tracing this, to me, this is a design feature. I mean, this is so nuanced, and to each their own. People may disagree with me. I would probably build this in. I would probably fillet this. Because to me, this is on the foot, it's on the base. Yeah, you could argue this is a design feature, but it's kind of like a secondary thought. I would build a hard edge for this down here. For this would be part of my sketch. I would sketch out an arc. That's somewhat nuanced, and again, to each their own. But I would say best practice, this would be in the master sketch. Okay. I'm going to set this to 0.9. If you want this to be concentric to each other, whatever, let's say, so I set this at 0.5. I know my wall thickness here is 0.4. If I add them together to get 0.9, I'm now going to have a fillet that looks nice and even. This can be done with a shell command, but we're not learning shells today. We're learning fillets and extrudes. Just like any other program, there's different paths to the same end goal. All right, cool. Um, let's do a third fillet now, and we're going to put this on the top. So before I start selecting features here, I'm going to set the number to 0.1 inches. It might be different for everyone because I said the wall thickness doesn't matter. So, if your wall is really thin, you might need to make this number smaller. But same thing here. You'll notice, right, I started at 0.1. 0.2 they meet because my wall thickness is 0.4. But you'll notice if I go one bigger now, it fails. And that's, again, for that same reason we looked at before. There's not enough space for that fillet to exist. So for me, I'm going to type in like 0.15, something like that. It doesn't matter. And leave this in here. And click check. Any questions on fillets so far? Okay. The other thing to be aware of is that the order of fillets is very important. So for example, if I take, and you can all do this too if you want. So does everyone have something that looks kind of like this? Sets of 3 fillets. If you take your third fillet feature and click on it and drag it, you can actually rearrange the location of features by clicking and dragging them. So let's click our third fillet and drag it so that it happens after our first one. You'll notice like something really weird happens, right? Again, the order of fillets matters, and this just comes from experience of knowing what you want to do. A general rule of thumb is like you might want to do bigger fillets first and smaller fillets last. You want to think about the way that you want your fillets to flow around your object. For some of you, this may have actually made it blow up. It may have given you an error on fillet 2. But here, if we look at what I did, you'll notice now that by moving this fillet, these 2 inside fillets to where I did, now if I put a fillet on this outside edge, it wants to turn this inner corner here. Does that make sense? So fillets flow around the tangency of the object is the simplest way to say that. So again, sometimes, for some of you, this may have failed out. If this fillet is the same size and I click on this, it now just gives us this like perfectly round corner. If I edit this to be smaller, so like 0.05, you can see now it travels around that corner like that. If I delete this and go back down to the massive fillet I put on here, it turns it and it does this really weird thing. So just, yeah, exactly. Grimace face, it looks ugly. So the baseline is the order in which you put the fillets does matter. The fillet follows the tangency of the edge that it's on. Any questions on that? That's a good question. Typically, I would do inside out, especially if you're doing a cavity like this. The reason for that is if I were to go ahead and do this outside fillet first, and again, just like put in a big number here, it's going to fail a lot quicker because it's going to run out of material when it hits that corner. Does that make sense? But kind of a trick question. Really, the best way to do this cavity in this instance with what we're trying to do would be with a shell, but we'll learn shells later. Okay. I'm just, in the same way that I showed you the different options for extrudes, I'm going to show you the different options for fillets real quick. Yeah, please. That's a good question, and that's another one where some people will agree or disagree. My advice would be to do it as a feature so that it's like clearly viewable at the end. Often as you're working on a file, right corners and are useful to reference. So again, in general, good rule of thumb to just end with your fillets. So if this were actually something I was trying to build, within here, I would probably select all of these edges as I go around. In this instance, if this is what I was designing, I would have used a square. Yes. Again, that's incredibly nuanced in the sense that it depends on what you're trying to do. If you know you want it to be a squircle and it's a squircle from the start, then I might actually have started this sketch as a squircle, right? And for sure, that changes. There's two different kinds of squircles. There's like the curved edges or the big round corners. If it's a curved edge one, for sure you want those curves in from the beginning. Okay, good questions. So again, I just want you all to be aware that this exists. I'll try and fly through this. I'm sorry, this already took longer than I intended. But it's okay, I'm going to just type in a number of 0.1. So if I select a face, you'll notice it will apply the fillet to the whole face. However, when it gets to these edges, this is going to be a sharp edge. So it is possible to apply fillets to faces. That can be useful in like an instance like this where you want the base to be filleted. So just be aware that that's possible. I believe it's possible to select faces and edges at the same time. Yes, it is. Yes, you should be able to. So I'm going to right click and hit clear selections. I can select, whoops, didn't mean to do that. You can, but there's a good chance you might get errors. Oh, you're saying, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you can select multiple faces. And you'll notice what happens when you select multiple faces that are together, then it starts to fill it out this corner. Whereas if you have a face next to a face that isn't selected, like here, you get this edge. Okay, so what do I mean? Let's watch this carefully. This face is filleted, none of these faces are, so you have an edge here. If I select this face, I'm about to click on it, you'll see that edge now turns into a nice soft round. Okay, so first thing to be aware of, you can select faces. Next thing to be aware of is there are different fillet types, okay? So this is the default, and this is what I recommend you use for the most part. You can have a variable size fillet. So what that means is if I select an edge here, it will give me two boxes to give dimensions. So I can set this to be 0.1, and I can set this to be 0.5. Didn't want to select. And you'll notice now the fillet starts small and gets big. You can. So like you'll notice there's more points in here. So I can select one of these. Like I can select this here. I can click on it and it will give me a new box. It says unassigned. If I click on this, I can say 0.5 and that will move it up. Does that answer your question? This is sometimes useful, but this can also lead to problems and errors down the road. I would say use this only in very specific circumstances. Try to avoid using this as a design feature if you can. Sometimes an edge fillet won't work, so that's where this is useful, face fillets. This tends to be more robust. I don't know how the calculations work within the program. I just know that face fillets will sometimes work when an edge fillet won't. So if you're trying to get something to be a certain size, you can always try this. What this does is you select two faces, so a yellow and a pink, and it puts a fillet in between the two of them. Again, the takeaway for this is that it is just happens to be more robust than the edge. I don't know why. I'm sorry, I can't speak to that. If you're absolutely curious, I can research it. Again, the main takeaway is that this one has like slightly different parameter settings. Don't worry about this now. That's too much in the weeds for what we need to know now. This is kind of a fun one, full round. It has you select three faces. It may fail with what I have here, but I can select this, this, and this. And what that does is, okay, here, sorry, I'm gonna roll back here. This is, sorry, I do things without explaining them. This roll bar, it's a way to go back in your tree and add stuff like in different locations. So essentially it's kind of like going back before you put this feature in and allowing you to put another feature in. So I'm rolling back before we put that cut in because what I want to do is put in a massive fillet on the bottom here that's just going to round this out. You see that? The reason I couldn't do it before is because, again, it cut into that negative space. just like that example I showed you all from that top view. So this can be also a useful tool sometimes when you want to do a perfect round from like two parallel edges or something. Yeah, Max. I'm not sure I follow, but so if I wanted to do, no matter what, you need three faces. So like, here, let me see if I, yeah, that'll work, absolutely. Oops. You're saying this, oops. You want to make sure that when you're using this feature that you select, that you move the box. Oh, weird, it does weird stuff. It does evil SolidWorks things. Gotcha. No, it doesn't work that way. um, yeah, weird things happen in SolidWorks sometimes. Use it for inspiration, but try not to design that way. Cool, good questions though. You can do that. Again, unique instances where you would want to do that. I can't think of any right now. I'll be honest, I've never, I've never done that. I can't think of any instance where I've had multiple faces in here. I literally use it as shown here, as described. Essentially, I hate to say it's not that useful. Like here, let's look actually here. Okay, I can think of an example where this might work. You might want to use it in a situation like this. Here's actually this is where you would use multiple faces. So I would go like that. For the inside, I would select this. This one, I would select this. Oh, there you go. I didn't even need to select all. It figured out what I wanted to do. Does that answer your question? Cool. All right. Any other thoughts or questions, anybody? Cool.